Hello everyone, my name is Jaime and I work with the MidPointe Library System. And for the week of May the 4th, we're going to have different activities for everyone virtually to participate in. And mine today is going to show you how to draw Baby Yoda, especially with the Mandalorian that came out. Baby Yoda has really hit the scene, and you probably see t-shirts and little statues, or I've seen a little bit of everything, like erasers, etc., stickers, and everyone has kind of their own point of view of the way he looks. And you can see right now that I have just a sketchbook page of mine that shows Baby Yoda, but drawn in several different ways. The one that we'll mostly focus on today is going to be the bottom right. I just wanted to show you that you can still draw a character or your own character even many different ways. There's different styles of drawing. Obviously, the very top ones are more realistic to what Baby Yoda looks like in the Mandalorian series. And as I went down the page, I tried to simplify him as much as possible and kind of makes him look like a cartoon. And that's sort of our idea today, is to take something that may seem a little intimidating and try to make it more simple. And who doesn't like making cute, extra cute Baby Yoda? So that's what we'll be doing today, and I'll show you how to do that. So all you really need for this video is, I would say, a pencil, paper, and an eraser. And I'll switch to my screen here, and I've got my tablet set up so that it'll draw in pencil. So it should kind of have a look like a pencil. And say once you finish this drawing, obviously you can always ink the drawing with a Sharpie marker if you want, or whatever you have at hand. Sharpie is going to be more permanent, but I would say just grab a sheet of copy paper and get ready to draw with me. We'll just break this down from simple to more specific. And since I said we're going to keep it pretty cartoony, just to kind of help everyone who may not be real familiar with drawing realistically or whatnot. But I always think the cartoony ones look pretty fun anyway to do. They're some of my favorites. So since Baby Yoda is pretty... like he has a very roundish head, let's start with that. We'll kind of create an oval on the screen. We're going to try to do his whole body, which you had seen. And you're just going to do an oval. Now I started a little big for my screen, so I'm going to erase just so you can see my whole drawing. Because at least with your piece of paper, you can kind of shift it around. On mine, it's not quite as easy. But you just want a good oval to start with. And it's fine if it's sort of sketchy like you see here. You can always erase and kind of adjust your shape to get the shape you're wanting. But I don't think it's real important to be super worried about it. A lot of times when you're doing portraits, even if it's kind of a figure that's not exactly human, you still want to think about that they are going to have a skeleton structure. So your spine splits up our face in half. And so I like to draw some of the guidelines to kind of help us figure out exactly where the face is. So I'll draw just a light straight line going straight through the middle of the head. And just imagine that that's the way his spine is. It's going straight up and down. And then normally on a human, you wouldn't split the horizontal where your eyes tend to sit. The horizontal line isn't really going to split your head in half because our eyes don't sit in the middle of our skull. it sits a little further down. And his is basically the same. So you won't go quite through the center. You'll be going a little lower, especially since his eyes are real big, but we'll do a soft horizontal line going through and creating a perpendicular kind of crosshairs that you're seeing right now with the straight vertical line splitting the face. So that's just going to kind of help us line up our features of Yoda. And everyone knows one of the biggest features about Yoda are his big ears. And it starts pretty high up on his head. You can always draw like a horizontal line going across the top if you feel more comfortable kind of lining them up. I'm going to keep them fairly straight across, and I'm going to start on the right side of our oval and connect the ear with the side of the head. And again, it's okay to be kind of sketchy. His ears are pretty wide, and it's just a straight line going off, and then a curved line that heads back to the head. And I would say you want the bottom of the ear to be a little below that horizontal line that we created to split up the face. And you'll just mimic it on the other side. And so you'll do that straight line on the left. Try to get it about as long or as long or wide as the other side. And then you'll do that side or that kind of half circle shape coming down. And right now we're keeping it fairly straight across. We're just getting some basic lines down to help us. Okay. So then, once you feel comfortable with those lines that you have so far, we're going to start adding in some features. So his eyes are pretty wide and big, but they also have sort of a human football shape to them. Obviously in a cartoon you can always exaggerate, you can make it more circular or more almond shaped, or just kind of mess with it. Now typically with a human, they have almost the size of an eye in between the two eyes. So if that helps you kind of line it up, do so. So what I mean by that is, so the tear duct, you could always draw a light line there on the right side and one on the left, and kind of say that's where your eye is going to begin. But you see the distance between those two lines kind of create a width, and we'll try and keep the eye the same width as it is in between the eyes. So then I'm going to try and keep it kind of a football shape where it's curvy and goes up high. But on the bottom, I'm going to make it a little smaller than the top part of the eye. But you'll want to mimic that same shape on the left. So it's more of that curve. On top, and then do the bottom. And here's where you can always kind of play around and try to get it so that it's similar on each side. But you can always erase with pencils. So you just don't want to grind your pencil into your paper, because the softer you draw, the easier it will be to erase. And so we've got the eyes down, and his nose, we're going to keep it pretty simple. So his nose would be right in between the two eyes. So you'll be using that straight vertical guideline and go slightly below that horizontal line, and we're just going to do a half circle. That sort of just shows the top of his nose. And then his mouth will be sort of split in between the bottom of the eye and his chin. And of course, we're going to make him a little happy Yoda. It's just going to be another curve, but reverse of what you did of the nose. So you want to make sure he's smiling. Which, as I was looking at pictures of Baby Yoda from The Mandalorian, he really doesn't smile. He's usually kind of in a depressed looking face or a little mischievous, but we'll do a smile because that's what I want. And okay, so then with your Yoda, we'll start adding more details to his forehead, since we've kind of ignored it a little bit at the moment. But he has a lot of little wrinkles, even for him being a young Yoda. But we're going to do almost like you were drawing a bird in the sky, like a V for his forehead. And it's going to be above the eyes, but following right on that vertical line. And not going to do anything real deep, just a couple little lines. And this is where, once you've have some of his face down, that you can start erasing some of those extra guidelines or any of your lines that you didn't like using, because we really don't need it right now. We can kind of get rid of that to help clean up the face. And we're going to add some of his clothing, but it's going to kind of cut off some of his chin because it just is. and we're not going to worry about just going right over top of it. But he kind of has this collar that comes up fairly high of the, I guess it's like a robe that he's wearing. And it has kind of a piece to it, like it's wrapped around and clasped in the front. So we're going to do a curved line starting to the left. And I'm just going to go right across, slightly past his mouth, and curve down to get the thickness of that collar, and follow that line back to the left. And I'm going to kind of round it off to behind his head, because you want to give it a feeling that it's curving around him, since he's technically a three-dimensional figure. And then we'll go back to where we left off on the right side of that collar and finish the opposite side of it. And just do the top part and kind of go straight out with a little bit of a curve. Do the top that rounds behind his head, curve around and start going straight down again. And follow your line back to the beginning of that collar. And this is where you can kind of erase some of your lines if you wanted to. But the body part is going to be super simple. I would basically do almost the sides of a triangle, but give a little bit of room for his arms on either side. So you'll come in from the left side underneath the collar and just kind of draw a diagonal line out from top to bottom and mimic the same shape but in reverse on the right side. Just so it kind of creates this, like if we connected these two lines, it would create a triangle. And part of his robe has sort of this piece that goes down the front, which maybe in our clothing it would be a buttoned up top potentially, but so it'll be just a couple of straight lines that kind of match up with the mouth we drew. So the left side of his mouth, you can always say straight down is part of the robe. Give a little bit over to the right before you draw the other half. And connect those two lines together. That creates the front of the robe. And then on your left side, the bottom part of that line, I would kind of round off and do the bottom of the robe. And do the same thing on the right side. Connect them. So there's the front of his robe. And now the arms of the robe are just going to be real simple, but obviously you don't want them to go all the way to the bottom of the robe because his arms are short, just like he is. So we'll do another set of small straight lines that kind of go in a diagonal on each side of the collar. But you don't want to go very far because we're going to do little rectangles on the ends, connecting to those lines we just drew. And that's going to be like the cuffs of the robe. And his fingers are really just kind of almost dinosaur-like with little claws on them, but we're just going to keep it simple, and he only has 3 fingers. So with his hands, kind of think of almost petal-like, like flower petal. So on the left side, we're going to curve it out and do his, I think it would be essentially his pinky. Then do his 3rd finger. And it's almost kind of triangular-like. There's his 2nd finger. And then his 3rd will spread out because it's kind of more like his thumb. But just to give some character to the fingers themselves instead of him just having like a closed fist. So on the other side, something similar, but maybe let's have this finger kind of step in a different direction. It just sort of brings some different interest. But same idea where it almost feels like little triangles or petals for the hands. Now, we're kind of going back up to the face. This is where we're going to kind of clean up some spots. Go ahead and erase again, like the bottom of his chin, because we really don't need the base of his head. And just try to erase some of your lines. And then this is where you can kind of start erasing some of the line that's connecting at the top of the ear to the head, because his ear is still a part of his head, but it sort of causes some creased lines. So that's why we don't really want the ears to be completely cut off from the head by leaving those lines completely closed on the circle. By opening them up a little bit, you can tell that the top part of his ear is really attached to the side of his head, because even though Baby Yoda has some hairs on the top of his head and even on the tops of his ears, he still is essentially bald. And so we're seeing a lot more of the ear to the head than we would if he had a full head of hair. So on the right side, on the right ear, by the head, let's do a curved line that follows the edge of that ear. And this is where I'll probably go in and kind of round off the tip of his ear a little bit. So say if you had it really sharp, I'm actually going to round it off just a tad. Just makes it, since he's supposed to be kind of a cutie character, that he's not too harsh looking. And then do the same thing on the left side. Kind of round it off. So that's sort of the inner part of his ear. Do a little bit of the edge of the ear going out. Then I'm going to the top left point of his ear and round it off a bit. And then just kind of decide a little more on what shape the rest of the ear is going to take. In fact, I think I made it a little wider at the bottom on the other side. Let's see. And then you can get a little more specific on the eyes. I always like adding light spots. You probably saw in the first image that I showed where I had some of my sketches. When you look at some of the pictures of Yoda, it does look like he has a dark pupil in the center and then an iris, but his eyes are so dark that most of the time it just looks like he has kind of alien eyes where there's no white at all. But I think there is a little bit of change in his eyes. It's just hard to tell. So at least with this being just cartoony and trying to keep it simple, I'm just going to do a couple of light spots and we'll make the rest of his eye just black or filled in. So we'll do like a big light spot on one eye. I'm going to do in the top left, and then the same spot on the right eye. In fact, that one's probably a little too small. And then I'm just going to do another little light spot. Oops, I think I accidentally hit something with my hand. Just do another little circle in the eye. And then this is where you can just sort of give yourself some information with the pencil showing that you're intending to make it filled in. But if you are planning on inking this, you don't have to fill this in. Like, it's just kind of something you can choose to do with the pencil so that you remember to fill it in when you ink it. But if you're just going to do pencil, you can still fill it in as well. And this is where you can kind of fix the shape of the eyes, or maybe the one light spot's a little too big. in there. I did the other eye, and I feel like the other eye is just a hair bigger than the left, so I'm just going to kind of correct that as I go. And maybe you can always kind of fuss with the shape of his head. If you don't really like the circle, or if you want it to kind of shape a little differently, this is where you can adjust it. It's still round, but I'm kind of letting it look a little more like it's down within that collar. And that's just something where as you draw and sketch, you'll kind of learn what you want things to look like for your stuff. And I mentioned that he has sort of little hairs on his head. You can always add a couple of little hairs because it does come to a point in the middle of his head. But they're just little soft fuzz pieces that are really cute. And if you still have some lines to erase, feel free to do that. But if you're going to ink it, you can always clean up once the ink dries to clean up your pencil lines more. But this is just an example of something super simple, not doing anything realistic or strict or anything, but just gives you an idea of how to kind of break down a character or try to simplify it, and how to do the face. And with him, he's super simple. He's when you simplify him down, and you still look at it and see that it's Baby Yoda. It doesn't have to be exactly him. It gives you enough information of him to be almost what you would call a caricature of him. And you could do this to your friends even. Like if your friend Susie has glasses, then maybe play up the glasses on her character. All sorts of things. Or try working your way through the Star Wars characters. The Mandalorian himself is definitely something you can draw fairly easily. But other than that, I really hope this kind of gives you an idea of how to draw Yoda. You can really stop at this point and start inking him if you want to. Or try your own. I suggest you trying maybe to do your version of Baby Yoda, because maybe you don't like my version, and that's fine too. And that's why you kind of saw where I kept playing at the beginning to see what he could look like potentially. But other than that, I really think you should try to draw some of the other characters on your own. I believe in you, and I hope you have the force to be with you and enjoy the rest of this week's adventures and activities. So I appreciate your time, and thank you so much for seeing me, and see you in the next one. Bye.